All right, welcome viewers to another official LDI live stream. This is part 3 of our how-to series on the topic of how to set intentions and train your perspective memory. Joined by me today is Skyfall Blind Dreamer, and I'm going to go ahead and let him define the terms that we'll be working with for this live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are having a wonderful weekend. So basically, I've always defined an intention as a present decision to perform a future action, usually associated with some type of trigger to help you remember to do so. But you're making a decision in the moment that you want to do something at a future point in time, and it may be temporal or it could be associated to circumstances or an event or to anything along the line that you want to be able to be triggered and reminded, hey, I decided I wanted to do this thing, and then you remember to do it. And then prospective memory is the process for how that works. It is task memory or working memory, remembering to do something in the future and using association to do that, because that's how we remember things, by associating things to each other. In this case, you're making a decision and you're associating it with the circumstances in which you want to do it. And this is a learnable and trainable skill, and that is what we are going to be talking about today.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. That makes a lot of sense. I think the important thing there is that intentions are specific actions taken at a particular time. And I think it's worth mentioning that we should demystify this term a little bit, because a quick YouTube search of how to set intentions shows a lot of metaphysical and even spiritual stuff about how to like manifest your reality and really kind of make what you want to happen come true. And while that may work for some people, really intentions are something we already do on a daily basis, right? We intend to accomplish things, may it be doing our homework or going to the store and buying something. Really the question is, how do we set intentions as it pertains to a lucid dreaming practice? And so we're going to work on sort of clearing the air on this topic and hopefully providing some real life practical tips that you can employ right now.
A lot, yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
A lot of people, because this is what I've come across over the years of talking about intentions, a lot of people see the word intention and, kind of like intimidated by it. It looks like one of those big words, and you're wondering, a lot of people don't realize this is something that is just normal, that we do as part of our regular lives all the time, that a lot of humans do. And I think demystifying the terminology helps you to understand, hey, this is something I already do. This is something I can do. If you decided you wanted to watch this stream today, you set an intention to be here. We had to set intentions to be here as well. And it is something that I think once you understand the terminology, it becomes a much more relatable to, what you already experience in your waking life, hopefully, for most of us.
Yeah, so let's just get right into it. And then if you guys stick around to the end, if we have anybody with questions, we'd love to answer it here on stream. If not, you can drop us a comment down below and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. So section 1 is how to set intentions, right? And I think the first thing we should think about is how to strengthen intentions through motivation and maybe even understanding the consequences, right? So let's go back to my earlier example. Hopefully all of us have been in school or had homework at a certain point in our lives, but whenever that happened for you, you would set an intention to complete a task, right? There's a homework assignment that needs to be finished. When does it need to be finished, right? That's an important aspect of intention setting, and that's why it's bound to the concept of prospective memory, or in other words, remembering to do something in the future. So when you intend to do homework, right, there's a reason that you have that intention. Usually it's to learn something, to get good grades, to avoid getting in trouble, right? And I like to focus on those positive aspects, although it's worth mentioning the consequences can also serve their purpose, right? If I don't do this, then this is what happens. Like if I intend to go to the grocery store to get eggs, right, and I don't do that, then I won't have anything for breakfast tomorrow. And it's those sort of motivations that help strengthen your intention. And that's why when you're setting an intention, people say set a strong intention. I think you should really work on really imagining your goal and why it matters to you. Ryan, do you have anything to add there?
I do. So to me, there are like two things I think that can help set a strong intention. One is how important is it to you personally? That's kind of what you're just talking about. Something that you really care about, that you have a strong desire to do, you're going to be more motivated to do it. You're going to more easily remember it. And then also the more you think about it, like kind of those two things together, the more you think about it and the more important it is to you personally to do, then the more likely you are to do it. Like when I've gone on trips and really wanted to go do something and I had to get up to go on a flight the next day, I almost always wake up before my alarm because that's something that's really, really important. And so I have this thing that I know I really need to do, and I have to do it at this time or within these circumstances. And so it really helps to remember your intentions when it's something you really care about. If you don't care about it, you're probably not going to think about it too much, and you're probably not going to remember it.
Yeah, good points. And I also think your intention should be clear, right? When there's a homework assignment, it's very clear what you need to do and when. Usually it's like a piece of paper that you have to fill out or something like that. So that's why I think it could be somewhat confusing when we talk about setting intentions for a lucid dreaming practice, for example. Because if your intention is, oh, I want to lucid dream, I would say that's somewhat of a weak intention because unless you've had a lucid dream before, you don't even necessarily know what that goal feels like if accomplished. I mean, you could be excited to achieve it, and that's important. But at the same time, you want to really feel inspired to, complete this intention. So, using specific language, including a time element, I think are all useful tips to strengthen your intention. Um, One example might be the next time I'm dreaming, I want to realize I'm dreaming, which sort of activates that perspective memory we'll get to in a little bit. But saying things like, I will lucid dream tonight, can also be kind of discouraging. Um, think of it this way. If you really feel I will lucid dream tonight, I will lucid dream tonight, and then you go to bed and it doesn't happen, you could find yourself losing faith in those convictions, and it could turn into this spiral of limiting belief. Right? You want to be realistic and optimistic, sure, but at the same time, focus on the process and not just the goal. So that's sort of what we're getting into here today, talking about
Mhm.
setting intention. Um, and so far we've talked about what motivates you and the consequences, using specific language and sort of setting a deadline, if you will. um, for me personally, if I were to create a phrase that encapsulates my motivation to lucid dream, my intention to recognize that I'm dreaming, I'm going to say something like, and this is highly personal, so definitely explore what words work for you, but I would say something like, I am so stoked to discover my dreams, to discover that I'm dreaming, something along those lines. And when you say it, when you think about it, it should really inspire you. And I think that's part of setting a strong intention.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Having some good goals, like however motivated you are, your motivation does play a role in intentions. Another thing to consider in terms of like a lucid dreaming practice and intentions in general is temporal intentions aren't necessarily the best. They can a lot of times like trying to say, oh, I want to do something tonight or I want to do something at this time. Not always the best way to typically go about that. And more like instead of just trying to be more kind of amorphous with like the time, you want to associate something with the circumstances in which you do it. So like when you're dreaming, you want to be able to recognize when something is out of place, or like, hey, if there's something out of place, I'm going to be able to recognize that I'm dreaming. So you're working to train yourself, hey, if there's a dream sign, if there's a potential dream sign, I'm going to recognize that I'm dreaming. Would be something along kind of that line, trying to get yourself to be able to learn and get through, get into the habit. Well, not would say the habit, but get into sort of being an ability to recognize circumstances and associate them with the decision that you've made. And honestly, that's kind of what mild is all about. You're training yourself to be able to rehearse those situations and understand what it is like to actually realize that you're in a dream from the perspective of your actual dreams that you've had. And you're training yourself, okay, I know what it's like to be able to, okay, recognize, hey, something like this is off, and associate that with dreaming and with knowing that you're dreaming. So that if you come across those circumstances, it triggers you to realize, hey, something is off here. this isn't exactly what it appears to be. Something else is going on. No, I'm not actually flying an Airbus A320 right now. That would be kind of awkward considering that I can't see. I have to be dreaming, something like that.
Yeah, and this made me realize that when you set an intention, you sort of do focus on the end goal, which is so important. It's like begin with the end in mind. And this carries through the entire process, right? So, again, if you're intending to complete homework, usually there are smaller tasks you have to complete in order to accomplish that goal, like specific questions. If you're intending to go to the store to buy something, there are also smaller tasks that you should accomplish in order to achieve that goal, like getting in the car, going to the store, walking to the location in the store, and all those little steps matter. But when you're setting an intention, all that you really need to do is focus on achieving that goal and doing whatever it will take to get there. That's sort of the mindset that I want to encourage. Because let's say you intend to lucid dream, but you don't keep a dream journal, you don't think about it at all during the day, you're not mindful in your waking life, you're not eating well, sleeping well, staying hydrated, all those things really are not conducive to a meaningful intention. Do you really mean that you want to lucid dream if you're not willing to put in the work? So that's what I want to encourage when we're talking about setting a strong intention. You really got to feel like you mean it and think about the words that will inspire you to achieve it. That's sort of how I go about it. Visualizing the desired outcome is also super important because you want to familiarize yourself with the result. And so Ryan just brought up a great point. That's sort of like the entire concept of mild, the mnemonic induction of lucid dreams, because you want to familiarize yourself with your dreams because that's the environment in which you are going to realize you're dreaming, unless you're doing a different induction method like wild, right? Does that make sense, Ryan?
Yeah, well, and since we are in the spirit of intentions, we are talking about intentions for lucid dreaming, and so really ultimately the most robust intention technique out there is mild in the context of intentions for lucid dreaming. But yeah, if you're having a dream initiated lucid dream, the way that happens is you recognize something, you notice something causes you to either question or to skip the questioning phase altogether and realize just, hey, I'm dreaming. But something causes you to sort of question that, to understand that not everything is as it appears. You're activating sort of that part of your brain that's not typically active while you're asleep, and you're becoming more critically aware of what you're experiencing, and you're being able to realize, hey, something is off here. I'm dreaming. And so, we're trying to use intentions here to help you remember to do this, and also to, remember to be able to associate circumstances with, hey, something isn't exactly right here.
Yeah, that's great. And so,
I would
go ahead.
respond to Supernova on the stream real quick. He said, Supernova, um, he says, using intentions in real life are way easier than using in the dreams. And I would actually disagree with a little bit about that, possibly, because the process is ultimately the same, but having a belief that it's harder to do in your dreams can actually make it harder, because your mind is pretty responsive to things like that. So having the sort of belief that this is difficult to do is actually going to make it harder for you to do that. So that's not actually something that's helpful. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, your belief matters, right?
Mhm.
If you think I can't do this homework because it's too hard, right? You're already setting yourself up for failure.
Mhm.
If you think, oh, I can't go to the store later because I'm busy, again, you're making it that much harder to mentally imagine what needs to get done in order for you to actually achieve that goal. And this makes me remember something else. If you're distracted, if you're stressed, if you've got a lot of other things going on, it is harder to remember your intentions. Let's say you really do intend to lucid dream, but you wake up late because you went to bed late and you have to rush to get to work or school or wherever you're going. And so you don't have the time to really dream delve in bed, wake slowly, recall your dreams like with due diligence. Then obviously your intention is compromised. And so that's why it's so important to have this sort of holistic approach to your practice, because if you are stressed, it's going to affect everything else. If you're distracted, busy, then it might just, not be the right time. And you want to take care of your priorities first before you spend any other mental energy on something like this. I really think that when it comes to intention setting, you have to have the positive mindset and belief that you will, no matter what, remember what you intend to do and think of what it will take for you to accomplish that goal when you intend to do it. That's sort of like the two-step approach that I like to take.
I think Supernova's comment is actually a pretty good segue. But before just getting too deep into that, your beliefs absolutely matter. You can only pay attention to so much at once. So if you're like really busy and you're doing a whole bunch of things, you can only really pay attention realistically to so many things at any given time. And so if you're constantly like and you don't have any time, you're not taking any time. And that's why when you're doing like critical awareness, for example, you really need to kind of take a step back from what you're doing, not just keep on doing whatever it is and be, caught up in it. And it's also how you can like lose lucidity, getting caught up in everything going on around you. You just lose track of the fact that you're dreaming. That's another thing. But what Supernova was saying about intentions and waking life versus dreaming, this is actually a really good segue into prospective memory training, because that is how you improve intention setting. It's you train your prospective memory, the process for how this works, and ultimately this is a trainable skill. You're not stuck at whatever, people I have people reply saying, oh, I've never done this before, or I've never been able to do this. And it doesn't matter that you've never been able to do something before if you can train yourself to do it. And in this case, if you have bad intention setting skills, or like you haven't really practiced very much, or you just haven't really developed them, good news, you can. I would definitely refer everyone to explore into all the lucid dreaming. Dr. Stephen LaBerge does actually outline a lot of this prospective memory training in chapter 3, where he discusses mild as part of like the daytime aspect of it. And so you can set basically, there are a couple different ways you can do this. LaBerge recommends setting targets for things to, typically arbitrary things. You can make them your own things. But the goal is, all right, so you're setting these intentions each day. And the goal is that for the first time you notice this thing in a day, you're going to take note of the fact that you noticed that thing, and you're going to do something in response. So he recommends doing like a state test in response to that, but you can do something in response to that. And critical awareness would actually not be a bad thing to do there. But you're setting up this, the system. And like if you miss a target, so say you missed your target and you notice it later in the day, you failed the intention for the day, but you're still training yourself to do better at it and to notice things, to notice your targets that you choose more likely. So you could set intention like, say next time I see the color red, or for me, like next time I hear a certain song, or, a certain phrase or a certain thing, I could say, okay, well, next time I hear that or do this thing, next time I log on to Reddit, next time I, hear reference to Star Trek or anything like that, like I could say you could customize these to something that happens during your waking life, or something that you might be likely to see or hear or experience, and then set these targets to train yourself to be able to catch them. You start small, you start slow, and try to build yourself up to being able to recognize things over, being able to remember your intentions over longer periods of time and actualize them. And you can just do this with your waking life too. You can set intentions to do things in your day-to-day life and remember to do them. So there's different ways you can train prospective memory, but you can train it. And then you can apply that practice to nighttime intention techniques like mild. And it's a very powerful and versatile tool.
Yeah, I love the practical exercises. We'll definitely get into a few more of those. And Stephen LaBerge actually dedicates a good portion of the beginning of that book to this specifically, because it is so important for lucid dreaming practice. And that's why we're talking about it today. Not only does it, have practical waking life applications, but it's definitely a cornerstone fundamental for dream work practice. And so I want to talk just for a moment about the psychology behind prospective memory, because it is a mental process. And so one thing I learned looking into it is that there's basically like 4 steps to prospective memory. And these are things that the mechanisms that actually operate within your brain. And so the first one is encoding. Think of this as setting your intention, right? You want remember to remember something. And like Ryan was just talking about, um, you can set cues to remember. That in and of itself could be your challenge, right? I want to remember when I see a blue circle. I want to remember when I see the color red. I want to remember when I hear a barking dog. Those are all prospective memory challenges, right? And so you're encoding at the time you set those targets that this is what I want to achieve. This is what I want to recognize, and I will remember to remember. That's the first step. The second step is retention. So then there's a period of waiting, right? So you set the intention, you know what you want to do and when you should do it, but now you got to wait for the right time to actually do it. And so it's important that you retain that information. It might even be helpful if you repeatedly remind yourself, oh, I have to, for example, do my homework. Oh, it's not the time yet. I still got some time. I want to do my homework, let's say after dinner. So that's the retention interval. Then comes retrieval. So let's say you've eaten dinner, and that was the event-based trigger that serves as a reminder to remember your intention to do your homework. I hope that makes sense, because the last step is execution. That's when, you've gone through the encoding or setting the intention, you've waited for that retention interval to pass, you've retrieved your initial goal and what it was you want to accomplish, and then you execute. So those are the 4 steps. And if anything happens to sort of interrupt that process, then let's say while you're setting your intention, you're sort of distracted and you're not really focused on what you want to do and why. Or let's say during the retention interval, you're eating dinner and just off the wall example, you spill milk all over the table. It made a terrible mess, and now you got to clean everything up. It ruined the meal. And now you're lacking the ability to retrieve what you intended to remember. So it's important that you think about those 4 things in terms of the process, because it's what really allows your brain to sort of click. And what I'd really like to do is talk a little bit more about daily exercises to enhance your prospective memory. So yeah, LaBerge has some great concepts in his book, but really what they do is they focus on these cues or triggers that remind you to do something, and in this case, a state test. So reality checks or critical state tests are a really good practice for prospective memory. It's not just recognizing when you're dreaming, which can also happen. You could spontaneously do a reality check within the dream, sure. But I would say more importantly, you're actually training your brain to remember to think critically. And what I personally like to do is to use certain reminders, like when I look at a clock, when I see a mirror, when I go through a doorway. And what I'm doing at that time is I'm retrieving my intention. Oh, I want to remember to question the nature of my reality, to question my state of consciousness. Am I being present right now? Where was I? What was I just doing? Where am I now? What am I doing? What am I about to do? And where am I going? Are all great questions to sort of train your memory in both directions, which is important for, let's say, dream recall, right? So retrospective memory is like, what did I have for lunch yesterday or last week? But prospective memory is what am I going to do later? And both are like a double-edged sword. You really do have to sharpen both ends. And Ryan, you have anything to add about any of that mention of reality checks?
I will say, I don't really have too much to add here. I do think that you can use state tests as a sort of object to do with perspective memory. Of course, you do have to find sort of the balance between doing a state test and actually being critically aware and doing them properly. But yes, you can absolutely set up those targets. Like that's one of the things that LaBerge actually recommends doing, is setting up those targets to actually have you then do state tests and learn to recognize things. And the reason why he does that is because it kind of ties in with mild and sort of associating, recognizing, hey, there's this dream sign here. There's something out of place. Oh, I need to check to see if I'm dreaming, or realize that something is off here. And so you can kind of see the parallel if you look at the doing state tests with recognizing daily targets versus doing mild and then recognizing dream signs and realizing that you're dreaming. You can clearly see the parallel between those. And I don't think that's an accident. I'm pretty sure that's intentional. So yes, there's definitely a tie in there. Intentions also are better for doing quality state tests and trying to rely purely on external sources and reminders. Um, Daniel Love actually had a really good comment a few weeks ago, I think, where he talked about how you can use external reminders and intentions for state tests. And it was actually a decent balance. And I do think I mentioned this somewhere. And I don't know if it was on one of our other streams. I think I mentioned it on one of our critical awareness how-to, actually, but I'll bring it up again here because it applies to intentions as well. But instead of using your alarm as your substitute for your retrieval step and your intention, instead of using the alarm as purely a substitute for the retrieval, the alarm is sort of meta. It's the reminder to check in with, did you fulfill the intention or not to actually remind you to do it. And so it has a sort of second level meta effect where the onus is still on you to remember to retrieve that intention and to execute it. However, the reminder is to check in to see if you actually did it or not. And so it kind of puts it on another level where it's a little bit, you can get some of the benefits without the drawbacks of purely tying your execution of intentions to just external reminders and alarms, which is not very helpful, especially in dreams where you don't really have those external reminders and alarms. It's not like you can just set a reminder on your phone to go to the store like you can do while you're awake. And probably I would imagine that some of those, reliance on sort of these, calendar apps and things like that, and, external reminders for things, people, it's basically like using the training wheels on a bike. You're not really, or even more than that, honestly, you're not really practicing the skill if you're also saying it to the computer, it's doing it for you. Sure, you can remember things when the alarm goes off or when the reminder goes off, it'll remind you of it, but you're not actually, the onus isn't on you to actually remember it. So you're kind of outsourcing some of that. And that's kind of how the modern world is going a bit these days.
Yeah, it's like remembering phone numbers, right? You don't have to remember anybody's phone number now because we use these external tools to catalog that information. But what happens if you lose your phone? So that's sort of what happens in a dream. You don't have a phone. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. More rarely or more commonly than not, I think you won't have your phone because you're so desensitized to it. It's not something, for whatever reason, your subconscious mind focuses on.
I used to
But I do want
to 20 phone numbers memorized before I had a smartphone.
exactly.
And now I only have a few.
So, coming up on the half-hour mark now, I do want to get to another question in the chat. Basically, the best prospective memory exercises are done using your dream signs, right? So, if you keep a dream journal, check out our first video on how to remember your dreams. Basically, dream recall is the foundation for any dream work practice. Once you do it long enough, I like to say, minimum one quality dream a night for like a week or something like that. LaBerge mentions one dream a night, or make sure you have a dozen dreams before you move on. But once you have a working relationship with your dream recall, you can go back, conduct some sort of dream analysis. You can identify recurring themes or dream signs, which are like strange things that wouldn't happen in waking life. That should have made you realize something is awry.
Okay. Because there are different categories of dream signs. I don't know all the categories by rote, but I can tell you that there's different elements to them. There's the things that are like the impossible. Oh, this can't happen while you're awake. Or there's the things that could happen while awake, but are just out of place. The context is wrong. You're doing something, but it doesn't make sense for why you're doing it. And then there are also things that can happen while awake, but also happen a very high amount of times in your dreams. And so they can be indicators that you would actually be in a dream, but they could also happen while awake. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Perfect. Yeah, that's very helpful. So, in other words, once you have a catalog of these dream signs, right? All the things that Skyfall just mentioned, then you can intend to do a reality check or to question the nature of your consciousness when you encounter them in waking life. And now, in my example, there are things that I absolutely will not encounter in waking life that happen all the time in dreams. Like, let's say, a nightmare where I'm running away from somebody, or, memory of friends from my past or deceased loved ones. But this leads to Supernova's question: how to know what targets you have to set up if you don't know your dream signs? Because for me, that's all random.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say believing it's random it could also be considered a limiting belief. Maybe there is some underlying trend or theme that you're not familiar with, and improving recall might help there. That's just the first thing I want to say.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'd like to take this one too, because I've been sitting on this for about 3 minutes. I wanted to grab this guy. So basically, the daily perspective memory exercises aren't necessarily going to be for your dream signs in particular, especially if you don't have like a bunch of recurring ones, and especially like if your recurring dream signs are things that don't really happen to you much while awake. Like one of my recurring dream signs is traveling, and while awake, I'm not often in say like Japan or Europe or other major cities, or traveling all across the place, or flying, or on ships. I'm not often doing that while awake. I'd like to. So I can't really use that as a target. But you could use emotions. Like if there are any emotions, you could use that as a potential target. But also, the daily perspective memory training isn't necessarily focused just on dream signs, but it's focused on improving that, exercising that muscle, sort of, exercising that perspective memory and training yourself to get better at it. So the targets could be anything. If you do have dream signs that occur while awake, like potential dream signs that occur while awake, you can, set intentions to notice those things while awake. But you can also make the targets more arbitrary, just to train yourself to be able to recognize, hey, I set an intention to recognize this thing. Okay, I recognize the first instance of this thing, and you can kind of keep track of your ability to do that, through intentions. And so you don't necessarily have to have a bunch of recurring dream signs and use that as for your daily perspective memory training. Um, you don't have to do it that way.
Yeah, it's like you don't go to the gym to get better at lifting dumbbells. You hopefully exercise to get stronger. And that's what we're saying with these daily exercises. You're not, intending to recognize red circles so that you can spot them in your dreams. It's really just getting better at the goal seeking mechanism we all have and sort of riding that wave of momentum towards success in your lucid dreaming practice. Um, there are a lot of studies who have examined perspective memory. Um, Main takeaways really are that setting clear intentions and using external reminders like post-it notes or phone alarms have been shown to drastically improve your ability to remember to do tasks. But again, we cannot rely on these tools while dreaming. We have to really flex that muscle while we're awake, practice these skills with actual exercises in order to get better at it within the dream, right? So if you have a goal of becoming lucid or even just remembering your dreams, by setting the intention first and then training perspective memory, you're bound to have better results. And with that, I kind of want to pass it back over to Ryan. Maybe he can give some key points from the conversation, common mistakes to avoid, and then wrap us up, because unfortunately I do have to go.
All right. Yeah, because that's why I brought up the thing with alarms earlier, and using them on sort of like that second level, that sort of meta level, to check in with your intentions.
Love that.
Build them.
Love that so much. It's like a race. Like, oh, I got to remember before this timer, because like at that point, like the food is burning. Look at it that way.
You can
Like if
thank
this
Daniel
timer
Love for
goes
that
off.
one. You can thank Daniel Love for that one. So basically, we've talked today a lot about intention setting. I mean, it wasn't the title, but I thought I'd say that anyway. But basically, just went over what it was. You're making that decision to do something in the future. Yeah, usually it's associated with the circumstances in which you want to do it that helps you trigger it. You're you're deciding that you want to do something. You're encoding that memory. You want to associate the circumstances in which you want to do a thing with the thing itself, and to remember that, and then be triggered to remember it at the right time, and executed. And intentions can be seen as this sort of intimidating word when you don't know the word. But honestly, once you realize what it is, and that we use intentions just as a normal part of our regular life. If you've ever decided to do something in the future, if you've ever decided to do something that wasn't in the present moment, and you remember to do that thing, you have set an intention. And that applies almost universally. There are people who don't do that very well, but that applies pretty much to most humans out there, and it is a normal part of life. Perspective memory itself is a skill. It's a trainable skill. You can train yourself through daily exercises, through setting smaller intentions, building up to things that you remember over longer periods of time, setting targets to remember, and you can use reminders and things of that nature to help you remember them. But they should be more of like a meta level, a second level, than sort of just the thing that carries your intentions. Otherwise, you won't be exercising that skill itself. And as it translates to dreaming, if you train that perspective memory during the day and you can have the sort of skill that is working, you can then train yourself to recognize those circumstances in which you want to be able to realize that you're dreaming, recognize something that is off, recognize potential dream signs, whether they be recurring or otherwise, and themes or patterns that you can associate with dreams and dreaming. And then you can associate that with either knowing that you're dreaming, because sometimes you just can if there's something that is impossible, or with doing a critical state test and trying to confirm if you're questioning but not really sure. But you can use this intention, this perspective memory, to help trigger you to realize that, hey, something is off here, and then activate that part of your brain that is, typically not as active during sleep, and be more critically aware and understand what is going on. And so ultimately, intention setting is a very powerful tool. Perspective memory is very powerful, and it is the foundation of the mile technique, which we talked about a little bit, but we'll go into more detail on that in another stream. But it is a very useful tool. It is a skill that is associated with skills for lucid dreaming. It is one of those skills that will help you to lucid dream.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you for being a part of this series with me. I really value your insights. Thank you to everybody in the audience who joined while we're live and after the fact. Hopefully you took something away from this video. We covered a lot, and I know these are like common concepts, but they really deserve to be broken down and given their justice, because this is the fundamental, foundation for any dream work practice. So let us know what you thought below. Be sure to follow our official LDI YouTube channel here. Check out our website. We've even got a Discord. You can find the link at ldinitiative.org. And like Skyfall mentioned, maybe next time we'll dive into some actual techniques like the mild method, or talk a little bit more about critical state tests and reality checks, because we've basically set the stage for some of the essential skills you need to develop before you dive into the actual techniques. So
just be sure to like and subscribe. Yep, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Please leave us a comment if you didn't make it and you were watching this after the fact. We'd love to hear from you. Again, ldinitiative.org. Please, if you haven't yet subscribed to our newsletter and you're interested in hearing more from us, please check that out on our website. You can subscribe to that and join the Discord. Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from y'all again.
Peace and sweet dreams, everybody.